guys. So today I'm yet again talking with the great, the all-powerful Dr. Scott Wustenberg from Optimal Life Chiropractic in Queensland. In case you don't know who I am, I'm Eric Hansen from Brain and Body Health. Google it, I'll come up. Today we're talking about dysglycemia. So that's pretty much blood sugar control issues, which is shockingly common. If you don't know if you've got dysglycemia or not, here are some sort of questions that you should be asking yourself. So if you get irritable, shaky, or a lightheadedness between meals, you've got dysglycemia. If you've got feeling energized after eating, probably dysglycemia. Do you have difficulty eating large meals in the morning? Dysglycemia. Does your energy levels drop in the afternoon? Do you crave sugar and sweets in the afternoon? Do you wake up in the middle of the night? Do you have difficulty concentrating before eating? Do you depend on coffee to keep you going? I sure do. Or do you feel agitated, easily upset, and nervous between meals? If you've got any of those, there's a fair chance that you've got dysglycemia and you should do something about it. So if you want to know what to do about it, you should listen to the rest of the podcast. If you're still confused about what the hell I'm talking about, you should listen to the rest of the podcast. All right, guys. Well, enjoy listening to the rest of the podcast because it is a really good talk between me and Scotty. If you've got any questions at all about anything at all, feel free to email me at eric@brainandbodyhealth.com.au and we'll talk about it at the next podcast. All right, guys. Enjoy. Dr. Scotty, let's talk about the magic of dysglycemia, which is obviously one of the stupidly biggest problems in did you see that that sugar film or whatever it was called a while ago? Because when they ran through the addictiveness of sugar, I mean, that was a bit of a wake-up call for me. I mean, even if we don't consider dysglycemia on its own, but just the sheer addictiveness of sugar. Get that dopamine spike.
Well, I think it's a bit simpler than that, and I think we are looking at it fundamentally kind of the wrong way. If you think about sugars of any variety, whether it's honey or maple syrup or table sugar per se, what actually is it? It is the ultimate survival food. It's highly consumable, and so I don't really think of it as so much of a dopamine spike when we're getting it. What you have to think about is that you've got those primary emotions seeking behavior, so to speak, as well as kind of hunger. And when you think about the hypothalamus and the flip between hungry, angry, etc., sugar comes in there. But sugar is the ultimate survival food. So we are hardwired to hunt for this stuff. And so it keeps triggering our seeking behavior at that moment because, in times gone by 100,000 years ago, since there wasn't kind of cane farmers and Coca-Colas and all the other wonderful conveniences we have today, you were being programmed to keep hunting for the thing to keep you alive as you went through your boom-bust cycle. So yes, it's shown to have as effective dopamine spike as crack cocaine, but I think if we look at it from that point of view, rather than that hard wiring of survival instinct to keep you going in times of bust, we're kind of doing it a disservice.
So what you're saying is like 100,000 years ago, a little bit of cocaine every now and then was okay.
Well, yeah, because you wanted
just don't have cocaine every day.
Correct. You wanted to stick it around your midriff and turn it into a rubber tire because, you were probably a crap hunter anyway, and you're not going to kill anything for a good week or more, so you're going to have to live on your belly fat.
Get that sugar into you.
Yeah, pretty much. You'd have gorged yourself on it. And so your brain would have given you a spike going, happy brain, happy body, have sugar. I'm going to make it through the next week. It's all good. And
I think it's always fun when you have you seen the photos of what traditional fruits used to look like? Have you seen a photo of what an old banana looks like?
Yeah, those things are amazing.
That looks horrible.
It does.
It's full of seeds. It's shriveled. It looks like, I'm going to say it looks like an old man dick, and no one would want to eat it.
Yeah, so that tells you about GMO right there, and not as we kind of keep imagining in the lab. This is what we've selectively been breeding for the last several hundred years to make things more interesting and survivable in different environments. And
that's like traditional ape man or 100,000-year-old human ancestor gets a banana. He's not getting nearly the sugar hit that we're getting when we have a banana these days.
That's exactly it. Yeah. So no, I haven't fully seen the actual sugar film. I've watched a small portion of it, and I've watched several of the different ones. But people kind of do some really interesting thought processes, and most of these things come off with bias in the first place. But there's a very simple answer to dysglycemia: don't eat carbs and sugar.
Yeah.
Well, look, solved. Given.
So, yeah, getting into more, dysglycemia. Can you comment on like dysglycemia and inflammation? Because I certainly find that's one of the bigger problems for me.
Okay, so dysglycemia and inflammation is never quite so much of a straightforward thing. What seems to occur is that the immune system gets itself all riled up, and it does so purposefully because we have these wonderful systems called apoptosis in the body. And apoptosis is programmed cell death. And what used to occur, again, 100,000 years ago when, our ancestors were getting that shriveled looking banana thing that you were so kindly telling us about, and getting carbohydrates from our environment, and we could break down some protein if we needed to, and turn, glucose out of that, as well as whatever fat we'd stored. And so the blood sugar stayed reasonably stable with some ups and downs, but the cells or the body developed a system which was the longer and the larger the amount of sugar in the environment, the more smearing would occur on the cells because of the circulation of the sugar in the bloodstream. And that's what's called, a glycosaminoglycan or a proteoglycan link. And the body's developed a system that says, okay, well, look, you've got a cell that's got 7 chains of glycosaminoglycan there, so that means the cell is 20 days old, or it's got 40, so that means it's 100 days old. And it used the amount of sugar smeared on the side wall, which we now use as a test called the HbA1c as part of diabetic management, to say, look, this cell is so old now, it's time to kill it and get rid of it because it's just going to have some problems and develop things like cancer. So the problem with that is, of course, is that with the soft drinks and with French fries and with the amount of bread and all the other things that we now have, a person can consume probably a year's worth of sugar pretty much in a day. And maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but, you could probably do it. And so you've got this flood of sugar smearing around your body all the time. And what occurs is it bumps into those cells and it forms these big long chains of glycosaminoglycans, ages and rages. And the body says, oh, okay, well, yeah, I only made that yesterday, but look, there's so much there, it must be a 100-day-old cell. I'll have to kill it. And it starts activating the immune system to knock out the cells in a programmed cell death fashion, and it actually starts killing off a lot of the stuff you really want to keep. And the body doesn't really like that very much.
Sugar ages you.
Correct.
That's the take home. That's no good.
That's exactly it. So that's one side of things, and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that then goes on from it. So what we then have is you have an inability when you get so much sugar going into you, after a period of time, you can't make enough insulin to cope with it. So the insulin, when you've kind of keep chucking it at your muscle cells, kind of doesn't actually get heard, and so you throw some more at it, and that doesn't get heard, and so the sugar, the glucose molecules keep building up in the bloodstream again, and that actually compounds this particular problem at the same time. And then after a while, of course, as it turns out, sugar is a fermentable and it's highly toxic to neurological tissue. And so the sugar alone actually just starts damaging it, especially your brain, and it causes massive impacts on things like autonomic nerves. So, don't eat it.
So, can you just go, maybe not everyone's a biochemist that's listening here, but so essentially you eat sugar.
Yep.
body releases insulin.
Correct.
And the insulin is what takes the sugar into your cells for use.
Yeah,
in 101 kind of fashion.
Basically, it presses the doorbell and acts as the butler to open the door. So if no one listens to the butler and you can't get the door open, the sugar can't go into the cell. And that's kind of the beginning of prediabetes leading to diabetes, and it creates, hyperlipidemias and all sorts of fun things. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
So to continue with the metaphor, so that's where you get too much sugar in your bloodstream, you've got to release a lot of insulin, and eventually the butler stops listening because the doorbell's going off every 3 seconds.
Yep. And then long term, you pretty well tire out your pancreas, so you can't release enough insulin to keep up with the amount that you need. Because fundamentally, if you scream loud enough, someone inside the building will hear you, which is kind of this process of increasing insulin insensitivity. You press the doorbell at 1, after a while that's no longer heard, it goes up to 2 to 3, and at some point you just can't make enough to actually scream loud enough for the doorbell to activate the system.
So symptomatically, what are people going to notice at the different stages? So when you're hitting the point of insulin's still working, but you're needing to up the amount of insulin that you're needing to pump out to get sugars in, versus you've got complete insulin sensitivity issues, the butler's not listening, you're screaming at level 10 and a trickle's getting in.
Yeah, well, that's kind of interesting because a lot of people won't really notice any symptoms, and that's the fun part about this. So, you can blunder along quite happily in a pre-diabetic state with significant insulin sensitivity and really won't notice, because people don't, what's happening. So you might get kind of slow, steady weight gain. You might get some weight going on around your mid-body, kind of hips and belly, but with really quite normal looking arms and legs. You might get some intermittent tingling. You might notice that you wake up feeling a bit headachy, or you might notice that, half an hour to a couple of hours after eating, suddenly you're noticing that you're really quite hungry again and your energy's dropped and that you need to eat some more. You might get a bit hangry, but like people kind of go, well, I haven't had enough coffee, or, I just didn't sleep that well. Oh, and we get aches and pains with these things. And the problem is that it's really easy to write these changes off as a multitude of other problems. And so people realistically can blunder along till they actually step over the cliff quite happily.
Searching and searching when it
yeah, absolutely. We could have muscle cramps with it, and so someone will throw some magnesium. And one of the things that people don't realize is that excessive sugar, to process it, requires a lot of B3, a lot of B12, a lot of magnesium. And so you'll be peeing it all out. And one of the side effects of getting rid of all your magnesium could be you might get a little more anxious, or you might get muscle cramping splints and actually feel quite tight and tired in all your musculature. Like deep, low-grade kind of my muscles don't feel very good. I don't feel robust at this moment is one of the things. And then, they get exercising a bit, which exercise actually drives your muscles to become more sensitive to the insulin and actually pick up blood sugar at that moment in time. So actually moving makes people feel better. Really classic sign that people kind of don't realize, and they'll go see a whole bunch of podiatrists, etc. They'll get foot pain, okay? And it's the foot pain that they wake up with. So they've been asleep for 8 hours. They've done nothing. There's no pressure on their feet. They get up, they put their feet on the floor, take a step. Oh my goodness, that hurts like blazes, especially kind of around the balls of the feet, etc. And they go, oh, my feet, I must have arthritis. I must have plantar fasciitis. And they'll go seek attention. But because it's really early stage and you haven't got all the ugly deformities that comes with diabetic feet, they'll probably end up with a pair of orthotics or someone taping their feet up. The secret to it, to differentiate, is, of course, it eases off as they move. So they wake up, put their feet down, it hurts like blazes, they walk 20, 30 steps, they feel better.
Yeah. Okay.
That's diabetic
Movement
feet.
helps?
Yeah.
Diabetic feet.
That's
it.
B12 insufficiency is the other one, and it can progress on to glove and stocking paresthesias depending. But that's a hallmark.
Can you go through, because I don't know the ins and outs, so inevitably if I get a patient that I'm like, well, that sounds like dysglycemia, go talk to Scotty. But the rough rule of thumb is if you have a meal and you get heaps of energy, or if you have a meal and you fatigue out after that meal, you've got some form of dysglycemia.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can you run me through the chemical process that goes through when people eat something and they get stupid energy versus eat something and they get zero energy?
They can both actually be the same thing. It depends on how long the stupid energy lasts for. They can be actually in that pre-diabetic range and have either sides of it. I kind of like the idea of you eat your food, you feel like I'm satisfied, and you didn't really have any noticeable change in your energy. If that's going on, everything's going kind of well. But fundamentally, you put the food in, your stomach acid is meant to be nice and high, and we break down the proteins, and that causes the release of pepsinogen, and everything kind of goes on. The food moves from the stomach, it ends up in the small intestine, bile gets released, and then the bile is actually reasonably alkaline, and it decreases the stomach acid, and this triggers the pancreas to start to release pancreatic enzymes and pancreatic bicarbonate, and of course, depending on the degree of sugar content in what you ate, the release of insulin. So what will then occur is, of course, high up in the stomach and intestine, you'll absorb things like glucose and very simple sugars. Otherwise, they may rely on a whole lot of your sucrases and other enzymes for digestion slightly lower down in the small intestine. But if it's easily absorbed, you'll actually get kind of a spike potentially in your blood sugar. So your body will then heave a whole lot of insulin, theoretically, at that blood sugar. And insulin in itself is a really old hormone along with cortisol. So people kind of think of insulin as the hormone that's actually about balancing blood sugar. People will say, when I ask them, so what does blood sugar do? And they'll return back, well, it regulates blood sugar. That sound about right? It doesn't. It's a survival hormone. Its kind of first and foremost goal is to actually take any excess blood sugar that you didn't immediately use and turn it into fat for that I didn't kill anything this week. So it's a boom bust cycle. Like cortisol's survival thing is pushing up your blood sugar and actually manufacturing new glucose from stored fat. So they work one to push blood sugar up and one to push it down. And the pushing down is about storing fat more than it's really about kind of getting sugar into your actual muscles. So the more your blood sugar goes up, the more the brain goes, oh, look, we've got lots of sugar here. We don't need it all at this moment because we're not moving very fast. So let's store that as belly fat. And so what occurs is the higher that blood sugar goes straight after eating, the more likely you are to get a slump straight after it because you've had to throw lots and lots of insulin at it. And the more insulin insensitive you are, the more likely it is that you get an increase in energy. And then, about a half an hour after eating, that insulin finally overcomes. You finally released enough of it, and that's what smunches you and causes that sudden drop in energy.
Would there be any mechanism where a link between, I suppose you wouldn't get a blood sugar spike, you wouldn't get an immediate inflammatory reaction unless you were eating something that you were sensitive to?
That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. So I was wondering, if there was an immediate inflammatory reaction, and then the mesencephalon, the flight, stress part of your brain that's got all of those receptors for influencing interleukin-6 and so on.
No,
but probably not that mechanism.
Not that mechanism, not straight away, unless you've actually got an allergy response to sugar, which is pretty rare, but I do have a couple of patients that actually have it. Weird systems that make that happen. But no, it's not in there quite long enough at that moment in time to have actually started off that particular mechanism. However, I was listening to a chap this morning who was talking about the responses of wheat, and his basic statement is the current literature basically proves that everyone's negatively responsive to wheat, and the only reason that we don't see more damage is because the speed of repair that the gut actually goes through because of these peptides, etc., like BCP157, causes you to actually damage it and cut holes in your epithelium, but like within kind of 24 hours you've actually repaired it after having the sandwich. And so it's people who have more tired responses will actually have more impact and start showing up. And this is kind of why you can go along till say 40 years of age not showing up your celiac signs, and suddenly you hit 40 and you've got ulcers or you're bleeding of the bowel or you've got polyps showing up, etc., because you've tired out your repair mechanisms so much because of the day-to-day, and I'll use the term abuse, from the...
but it couldn't be gluten. Gluten couldn't be the issue because I've been eating gluten all my life.
Yeah.
And this is a new thing.
Absolutely.
I don't know that I'll give it... Yeah. How many times have you heard that one?
Well, I've heard it hit vastly. I mean, imagine something that I've eaten before not suddenly becoming a problem. But that's what the literature that this gentleman was quoting this morning. And, it makes a lot of sense. The gut really does have these massive enzymes that cause very fast repair. Every part of your body kind of repairs itself every 7 years. It's no longer the same body you had 7 years ago. So you are designed to be repairing yourself. It's just if you tire yourself out that it gets on top of you. Now, of course, wheat in itself, regardless of the gluten, is a highly kind of involved carbohydrate. And so that degree of sugar that gets released, especially because, of course, nowadays, instead of you eating it as a whole grain that you chewed up when you found it, we've processed the bejesus out of it, and it's now kind of a white powder that if you mix with water, you could stick your wallpaper to the wall with. There's a great rule of thumb. If what you're about to eat you could kind of mix with water and turn it into a glue paste, probably a good idea not to stick it in your mouth because it will contribute to a dysglycemia.
Do the same thing to your guts?
Yeah, pretty much. Well, it doesn't really glue them all together like in the same way. It just creates that inflammatory change. Because again, depending on where the continuum of your tiredness, meaning like if you've been punching yourself in the guts for 60 years, you're going to be less capable than perhaps 20 years of abuse. And then, you can throw some alcohol, which is a high sugar sort of consumable, and that just damages things even quicker.
I want to backtrack a little bit. So with the load on the pancreas and the islet cells pumping out all of that insulin.
Yep.
The mechanism for sort of like acute pancreatitis or any of the pancreatic issues, like cancer and so on, is the mechanism there from? Because I know, there's a strong relationship between alcoholism and pancreatitis.
Yes.
Is it the sugar in the alcohol overloading the insulin islet cells causing the acute pancreatitis? What's the mechanism behind? This is a better question.
Yeah.
I really need another coffee. What's the link? Is the acute pancreatitis linked to dysglycemia, and how?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So there's a whole bunch of stuff involved in there, and so things like gallstones are going to be involved in it, and alcohol abuse is absolutely a part and parcel of it. Fatty liver disease is going to contribute your absolute amount of body fat. how good your gallbladder's been working. Have you been overstressing it? Do you have a dysfunction of your calcium metabolism at that moment in time? So alcohol can't be stored in the body. So you have to process it. So you have to keep throwing enzymes at it and stressing the liver and the bile to actually keep working to get it through. So your liver needs to be utilizing your alcohol dehydrogenase, etc. So anything else that you eat in and around that till the alcohol's been processed has to be stored. So at the same time, you have a couple of glasses of wine, every night with your evening meal. And so all those, the pasta or the rice or the potato, etc., that you've been consuming while having those glasses of wine has to be stored. So you then have to use your insulin to pull all those carbs out while you use other parts of your system to actually process the alcohol out of the system. And, at the end of the day, it's usually the longer this has been going on for, and the more likely you are to have a blockage of your common bile duct, the more likely you are to have the acute pancreatitis. So the enzymes, of course, that come out of the pancreas and other pancreatic fluids coming out of the same one that the common the bile has to come out of. And so it's quite often the stress from the gallbladder that actually finally kicks the whole thing off.
Just to jump track again, can you explain to me the HA1BC? Is that the right sequence of letters?
HbA1c. So
that's my dyslexia kicking.
Yeah, the hemoglobin A1c is a measure of your dysglycemia and how well managed diabetes is. So there's a cutoff level of, I think it's about 6. Under 6, you're doing awesomely. 6 to about 7.5, you're well managed, and then it goes up, and the higher that number is, the more stressed your system is, and the more diabetic you are, poorly managed or otherwise. So fundamentally, what they do is they take your blood sample and they stick it through the computer spectrometer, and they basically count the amount of glucose smeared and changed on your red blood cells, specifically on the hemoglobin. And as I say, the higher the number, the worse it is for you. And so again, what that fundamentally does to the system is the bigger those change, the more likely you are to set off apoptosis. So everyone has a degree of HbA1c. It's quite normal because you have to keep your blood sugar within a certain range. You cannot let it get too low, otherwise you go into a diabetic coma and you basically pass out and potentially die. So this is why the system has a huge function of pushing up your blood sugar using things like cortisol, and you make blood sugar out of stored liver fat, and so this is part and parcel of fatty liver disease when you've just got so much fructose and carbohydrate coming in that you store it and you just don't burn it soon enough, so there's just more and more and more stored. Because, let's face it, the body is not going to waste any possible acid it has, because there could be a tiger, there could be a monster out there, and at the end of the day, the amount of stress we have in our modern lifestyle that keeps us constantly driving adrenaline and cortisol and the catecholamines makes us believe that dinosaur is after us all the damn time. So HbA1c is a fundamental basic blood test that is going to measure how much sugar is smeared on your red blood cell hemoglobin. And if you let that number get up too high, you're going to get some serious problems, including potentially losing toes to gangrene, etc., because it will cause your autonomic nerves in the periphery, especially to the capillary beds and the control of your peripheral capillary beds, to actually start killing stuff.
Those levels, so the sub 6, you're doing well, to 7.5, you're all right, but after that, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Is that sort of the industry standard recognised from the GP point of view, or are they the Scotty, this is the physiological, what actually is going on levels?
No, I mean, those aren't the exact numbers, and I can look up the exact numbers if we want, but those are roughly the physiological things that the GP would look at. There's a standard for these things.
Same advice.
Yeah.
And that's part of your standard blood panel? the HA1BC?
No, it's not. So that it's part of my standard blood panels that I will look at with people, depending on what problems that they're actually coming in with. So, if a person's going to come in and they've got an apple-shaped body, or they've got like really cold purple-looking feet and things like that, then I'll definitely look at running an HbA1c. However, on the flip side of that, the HbA1c tells us how much potential for damage, and if the person's had like 10 kilos of extra mid-body weight on a 4'2" frame for 10 years, you don't really need to know exactly, these people. So it's really kind of more important to go, right, well, we need to get some treatment going. Let's change your diet. Let's use some supplements to try and help stabilize this. Maybe
this is a great time to say, if someone's got dysglycemia, what do you do about it?
Several things, of course, I'd look at doing. One, first and foremost, I'd be changing their diet, would be looking at the volume of carbohydrates and sugar, and would be starting to try and reduce the amount of easily consumed carbs. So you get rid of the chippies, and you get rid of the sugars in their tea and coffee, and you start reducing coffee from them as well, because again, the caffeine is for an adrenergic stimulant, which will of course drive the system that little bit harder, which requires more energy, which requires cortisol to be released, which requires the blood sugar to go up. So caffeine in that stage, not such a great thing. Similarly with sodas and diet sodas. So there's a trap for young players in this particular game. People kind of consume those diet sodas going, well, look, 1 calorie, and it's
diet soda is so good for you.
Yeah, 1 calorie is absolutely the truth in there, and so no one's lying, but what they neglect to mention is that your brain doesn't sense kind of sugar, it senses sweet to start with. So you pour sugar onto your tongue, and your brain, the receptor on your tongue, recognizes the sweet, and it's been programmed for millennia to believe that sweet must mean some form of sugar. So it starts activating the systems in the rest of the body, because oh my goodness, there's a whole bunch of sugar going into me. I'm going to have to get the pancreatic bicarb going, going to have the sucrases, etc., etc. So it starts activating the same systems that it would do if you poured a regular soda in rather than a diet soda. And lo and behold, people put on equally as much, if not more weight, drinking the diet product than they did drinking the other one.
Yeah, it will melt your brain as well. But and from a supplement point of view, what's your top 5?
So my go-tos for this will include a B complex, because they absolutely are going to need B12. They're absolutely going to need B3. B6 is really particularly helpful. Magnesium can be particularly helpful in this particular situation. We probably want to measure to make sure that their iron levels are effective, because all of the P450 enzymes in the liver are actually iron dependent. And so if we're having to upregulate that detoxification pathway from the liver, we absolutely need some of those. I use Uvingia and sulforaphane at the same time. So Uvingia is a West African, it's called a West African mango nut, and it's a traditional food.
I was reading about this.
Yeah. And so they've been using it for particularly long periods of time, and it's shown to actually regulate blood sugar and decrease appetite and increase endurance. And so like the West Africans use it for a variety of different things. It's shown to have as effective decrease in pain as analgesics and opioids, and there's some really good studies on that stuff. It's shown to burn off mid-body fat. It increases insulin sensitivity. I actually came across it after going to an endocrinology seminar, and it was, an endocrinologist is actually sitting there saying, yes, and this is the herbal supplement I use in place of metformin, because it's shown to have as good an effect as that. Again, in some people's cases, I would actually recommend the drug metformin, but you've got to use that very carefully, and you need to give a bunch of B12 with it, because it will decrease B12 in the body. But it does work very effectively to actually create insulin insulin sensitivity. And if you need to do that in a hurry with someone, it's quite a safe thing to do for a period of time. You just got to kind of make sure of the person not getting respiratory metabolic acidosis. That could be a bad idea. Yeah. No, well, you only crack all your muscles and sort of head towards death fairly quickly. So metformin might not always be my kind of thing of choice, but in certain cases it can be awesome. Sulforaphane from broccoli extract is another really clever product. Again, it's shown to balance out and stabilize blood glucose levels, and it helps decrease NRF2, so it decreases the inflammatory cycles in the body. So it's particularly good for protection against the diabetic or sugar-induced damage and the dysglycemia. It reduces fasting blood glucose, and it reduces the glycation of hemoglobin in obese patients and people with diabetes. So it's particularly effective for that. It's shown to help the body actually decrease damage to the myelin sheath. So, there's a lot of issue with demyelination of your fast fibers in the feet, and this is where a lot of diabetics and pre-diabetics, etc., get balance disorders because they become unaware of where their body parts are. So, there's a bunch of other things that you could possibly use. Vitamin D is really important for it for a variety of reasons, but it's essential for regulating metabolism and the conversion of T4 to T3 to actually burn energy and actually keep your insulin sensitivity occurring. So you need to know what people's vitamin D levels are and probably increase them. Now, we live in a sun-baked country, don't we? But you'd be amazed by how many people are actually vitamin D deficient.
Well, isn't that, I remember reading that anyone south of, I think it was like Port Mac or Newcastle, so if you're Caucasian and you're south of that line, you don't absorb any vitamin D in the winter months.
That is absolutely correct. It doesn't actually matter what colour you are.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, if you think about it, the average person with dark skin, say an Indian or an African Negro, they've already got an SPF factor of about 5 to 10 because of the melanin, but they burn really effectively, as it turns out. So if you've already got kind of a little bit of extra sunblock and you need a greater degree of sunlight to actually get your vitamin D up, then you're actually at greater risk of vitamin D deficiency, especially in the wintertime in this country. So, Melbourneites are going to have a real difficult time in the winter. People above kind of, Newcastle, Coffs Harbour area will actually make it, but it's realistically between about the hours of 11 and 1 p.m. roughly.
How many of us are out and about for that time of day if you work in an office? Good luck.
Exactly. And one of the things you've got to keep in mind at that moment is it's about naked time. And
I was about to say, let's full-blown nudity for at least 10 minutes a day.
That's it.
Yep.
You've got to have your skin out. It's a solar panel sort of effect, and people go, "Oh, well, look, I was out walking in the sun," and they might have their hands free or their arm and maybe their nose. We're not really getting a lot everywhere, and people do wear a lot of sunblock and wear a lot of consciousness about not getting, skin cancers. But there's some problems with that because vitamin D is, of course, not only essential for stabilizing metabolism and blood sugar, but it's essential for running your immune system and actually is essential for killing off certain viruses. And there's a bunch of viruses that are involved with driving cancer. We're actually finding out that probably most of the cancers, if you think about things like cytomegalovirus, that's a herpes virus, right? And so what other herpes viruses do we know definitively cause cancer? Well, there's, cervical cancer for a start, and there's, different other ones that we can go into, but we're getting away from the blood sugar. Although, blood sugar and dysglycemia is particularly important in cancer situations because we tend to find that most or lots of cancers at any rate have a really high metabolism and need vast amounts of glucose to keep going. So, of course, not having vast amounts of sugar in your bloodstream is actually really important to decrease your risks of cancer at that moment. But,
I just got an image in my head of me walking the dog full nude, and then a cop siren going off and saying, "Excuse me, sir, what the hell are you doing?" And so, "I'm sorry, officer, I'm just worried about my dysglycemia and cancer risk.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind, I'll continue walking."
Yeah, no, maybe there's an end point to how much nudity. Maybe just like throw on a pair of shorts. And again, the problem the problem is that too much sun on your skin, especially if your skin's not used to it, will actually drive BCC cancer risks. And in which case, you need to be getting yourself double checked. And one of my favorite pieces of advice is, go every 6 or 12 months to a mole map or a skin check place and get yourself checked. But you need safe sun, and you need it without the sunblocks, and you do short periods, 5 to 10 minutes, earlier in the day, later in the day, and then get checked. Because if you don't get enough, and people say, well, just take a pill. That's true as well, but we're not as sure exactly that taking a vitamin D supplement works exactly the same as having natural ultraviolet light. Apart from anything else, without your ultraviolet light hitting your eyes, you don't actually make melatonin. Without melatonin, you become dysglycemic.
Is it like the rough rule of thumb, you need enough sun, or if you start to burn, it's too much?
Well, if you've got to the point of burning, that's pretty much too much for that moment in time. You definitely got enough sun, and you definitely made vitamin D at that moment in time, but we're really not trying to burn you. We're really just trying to get a little exposure, and then the next day a little more exposure, so that you can keep stimulating the production in your tissue. And again, from the eye's point of view, you need to be seeing sunlight in the morning, sunlight midday, sunlight in the afternoon, so as you can stimulate your brain to actually recognize that diurnal cycle to turn your serotonin into melatonin, because it's essential for regulating blood sugar, regulating cortisol, regulating sleep cycles, and decreasing cancer risk. Melatonin is a really effective antioxidant that decreases a whole lot of risk factors towards breast cancer.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So people with dysregulated sleep cycles are at risk of a whole bunch of things, including, of course, dysglycemia leading to prediabetes, diabetes, obesity. It just goes absolutely terrible.
Mate, let's start to wrap this up. So let's suffice to say that if you've got a little bit of belly fat, and you want to make sure that you last a good long while, and you don't want your body to eat itself because you're covered in sugar.
Yep.
Get your blood tests done.
Absolutely.
Do some insulin control work if there's an issue, because if you don't, you're not going to have a fun time.
Long-term dysglycemia and high blood sugar levels are really bad for the brain. They're very damaging. They're bad for the peripherals. Any areas that have high metabolic drive in the capillary beds are absolutely damaged by excess sugar in there and excess insulin going in. You need to get exercise. You need to move. It's absolutely critically important for it. And these are the benefits of going to, chiropractors, functional neurologists, functional med, actually stimulating the body to move. Exercise physiology is important at that moment. We've got to look at trying to get things like the sulforaphanes and vitamin D back in balance. The use of things like magnesium is particularly important. Drive down the inflammation. Get that diet under control, that you're not sticking things in that you're allergic to, because that's one of the areas. If you're allergic, it's going to drive a spike in your adrenal levels. So your adrenaline goes up, blood sugar goes up because you're running from a tiger, and we get that dysglycemia regulating again. So if you keep spiking yourself, it becomes awful at that moment in time. And this is made worse by the fact that, of course, food technologists know that the food is yummy and you want to eat it by sticking lots of salt and sugar and fat into it.
Mate, that's I feel like we could talk for hours and hours and hours on this. But mate, that's good talk. Good
awesome.
Good talk. All right.
No trouble. Well, I will look forward to providing whatever information you would like within my field as to our next time. I hope all the people found that really interesting, if not a little scary. Change your diet. It's really, really important.
That was the that was what we're going for.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right.
Okay.
All right, mate. Yeah.
Bye.
Well, that was fun. Guys, I apologize again for the crackle in my microphone. I have no idea what's going on, but I'm going to talk to someone who knows about microphones to figure out exactly what it is so that it doesn't happen again. Apologies. So, again, if anyone's got any questions about dysglycemia or anything at all, email me, eric@brainandbodyhealth.com.au, and that's Eric with a C, not a K. People with Ks are crazy. If you want to get in contact with me, you can either get me or email or 02 9817 6611. If you want to get in touch with Dr. Scotty, he can be found on 07 3371 0222.
Thank you for watching. To learn more from Dr. Scott, visit our site at optihuman.com.au.